So you're probably asking yourself, what's the difference between SQL and non-SQL? Both of these methods are very effective database management systems which allow you to store and manage your data, and they vary depending on your requirements, your system, your the kind of data you're going to be storing, as well as your budget and so many other factors. Um, and most people tend to hear about SQL before hearing about non-SQL, and this is actually really not surprising, because in practice, we humans, when we think of data, we tend to think of data as somehow structured, and that there's going to be some kind of relationship, or there's going to be some connection between the data we're going to be storing. And this is exactly what SQL means, and the SQL actually stands for structured query language. um, so let's say we have a website which collects customer information or user information, and we're going to be, let's say, collecting stuff like their name, of course, email, phone number, maybe address, age, gender, and this usually comes. I mean, if we're talking about SQL, this definitely has to be tabular. That is coming from in form of a table, and a table consists of in SQL consists of rows and columns, and the columns are the vertical. Are going to be the vertical ones, and the rows are the horizontal. So let's say this is our customer table, customer table. Now on this table, we're just gonna be collecting three basic things. I'm gonna put the ID here, and I'm gonna put the name here, age, and I'm gonna say sex here. That is the gender. And so let's say the name of the first person. Let's just say Sam. Next person Alice maybe, and the third person could be Tom. So and the age we could just put 23, 35, and let's say 19 here. And their gender or sex, of course, is going to be male, female, male, and ID. So if you haven't heard about primary or foreign keys in SQL, you might want to take a look at that, because sometimes, or usually, when we have multiple tables in SQL, there is this so-called primary key which is consistent across all the tables, and that is how um, it's kind of how you compare values from one table to values from um, another table, and I'm going to explain what that means. So our ID, for example, I could have 01, 02, and 03. So the ID is sort of what's consistent, because think of it like the name is not consistent. Like there could be two people with the name of Alice, Sam, Tom. There could be multiple people with the same age, as well as definitely with the same sex. But the ID is always going to be consistent. There cannot be two people with the same ID. And so if we have another table, let's say, I'm gonna just put here, let's try to create another slide here. So another table here, and just make this a little bit longer. And on this table, as you probably guessed, the ID is still going to be the same. But let's say this table, because in our first table, that is where we collect the name, age, and sex, and this is maybe useful. For example, on the sign up page, it's sort of like a way to identify the users or customers. But let's say you have another table for processing their payment, or their subscription status, and so now we're gonna, what's gonna be consistent here is still the IDs. So I'm gonna have, just gonna see how many rows I had. I had four rows, so I also have to have four rows here. And and I had 01, 01, 02, 03, and the first one being Sam, Alice, and Tom. And here we're gonna be having, this is the ID. um, the name, actually we don't even have to have a name here, because probably not very smart here to have a name. I'm just gonna change that here, and instead of a name, because this is a whole different table for pressing the status, subscription status, so I'm just gonna directly have, I'm just gonna say premium, and this is gonna be a boolean value. um, so let's say true, um, false, and false. So it's saying, are they a premium member? If it's true, then yes, and if it's false, then no. And this one could be, let's say, let me just erase this last column here, because I don't think we're gonna be making use of that. um, so premium, and then we're gonna have, let's say, dates, maybe the date that it registered for a subscription. um, and this could be any date. I could just put 2023, 12/31. And sorry for my bad handwriting. I just put 2024, 01/04, and 2024, 01, 21. And and this is the ID, and as you can see, the IDs was consistent across the tables. And we can have so-called constraints in SQL, because when we set this ID in the second table is the foreign key, while in the first table is the primary key. And we usually set this constraint, to maintain the integrity of the database. Because think of it like, if we happen to delete the 202 ID, for example, then it's gonna be, this table is gonna be practically useless, because this table, we're not gonna be able to know who's like what customer this number or this ID belongs to. So this table can, the ID column on this table kind of serves as a way for us, or as a comparison to the first table. And we set this constraints, just like I said, to maintain the integrity of the database. And so what I was basically all I'm trying to say is that SQL, compared to unlike non-SQL, is very relational. And when we create tables, these tables actually have a sort of column that is consistent across multiple tables, which in this case is the ID. So the ID is what's consistent, and other, we could create countless amounts of tables, maybe for the registration, payments, maybe subscription status, just like this one, and maybe comments, and so on and so forth. It could be based on requirements, just like, or how our website or application is built. But and examples of SQLs, or examples of management systems with SQLs is MySQL, Postgres SQL, and SQL. So these are the major types of SQL, and of course also Microsoft SQL Server. And now we're going to talk about non-SQL, and non-SQL is basically the opposite of this. And non-SQL allows you, like, there is no emphasis on that structure. So because here we have in SQL, we have like a schema, and everything is already structured, because you really have to have every table has to have this column row structure, that is like predefined. Whereas in non-SQL, I'm just going to create a new table. It is not like you have it's like you're given the power to, structure your schema as you want. So because if you think about it, in SQL, you have ID, premium, and dates in this table, for example. So all data has to have a premium value, a date value, and an ID value if it's not set to null, of course. But every data or documents in has to adhere to this table. They have to have a value in each field, whereas in non-SQL, you could literally in the same database have documents that have different schemas. So let's say you could have now, it's probably worth mentioning that in NoSQL, unlike SQL, the preferred term for the word database might differ. For example, in MongoDB, which is one of the top NoSQL service provider, the term collections is used, and this kind of makes sense to me, because when I think of NoSQL, I kind of think of data that is stored in an arbitrary format. So there is no specific structure to it, unlike the traditional SQL. And and you could there I mean both are similar in by the fact that they're used to store and manage data, but they're more tailored or customized for different purposes. Now, since NoSQL, since the contents in the collections of since in NoSQL, the contents in the collection doesn't have to have the same schema, and that is they could have different fields that are not unlike each other. Then it is more it is more expected to use it for storing things like maybe comments or like a blog post, data where the fields are expected to vary, and not be like each other. So for example, we could have a blog post, for example, and also to mention in NoSQL, there are different methods for storing data, and it's not just tabular like in SQL. In NoSQL, it could be stored as JSON, which is usually the de facto, but there is also graph and columnar, and so but in JSON we have just like JSON, we have a key and a value, and we can just have ID here. Just gonna make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so ID, maybe a blog ID, for example, and that is called, by the way. No, it doesn't look like it, but ID, I could say 001, and title, I could say title could be first post. I'm just gonna put this in a string. First post. I could say, and also we could definitely have contents, and I could just put just to lorem ipsum, just to random, and I'm gonna have maybe, let's say, tags, and the tags could be educational, it could be premium. Maybe you need a premium subscription to read it. Yeah, and that marks the end of our, and also this is going to be an array since we're having multiple values, and and the end of our tag or our JSON there. So this is, our first set in the collection, you could say, and the second set could have a totally different schema. Like it could, instead of ID, it could be name. Instead of title, it could be header, or the topic. It could be totally different. And so it's like MongoDB like gives you more control and more flexibility, and you don't it doesn't have to be rigid like SQL. And yeah, so that is basically the main difference between SQL and NoSQL. And also to note is that NoSQL, apart from having different models like JSON, graphs, and columnar, they're also really or easily scalable. And as you probably know, there are two types of scaling. We have vertical and horizontal scaling, but no SQL is way more optimized for horizontal scaling. And yeah, so you could depending on your application, or what you're trying to design, one might suit you better. But if you're not sure, then I would definitely recommend SQL, because SQL is sort of like the traditional, and why NoSQL usually takes a little bit more skill to to utilize and understand fully. I hope that answers your questions about the difference, and there's definitely more to talk about on this topic, but that is all there is going to be for this tutorial. If you have any questions, kindly leave them in the comment below, and a like and subscription is very much appreciated. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.